Hey,
Hey.
everyone. So thank you so much for joining us today. I am Coach Heather with Momentor. And today we have an amazing co-host. I'm excited to introduce you to her. And on this edition, we're going to talk about moving through trauma, which is universal as it is complex an issue. So I'll start with a quote. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. That Brene Brown quote. Love Brene. And ooh, yes. So I'm Coach Heather. I'm a workplace well-being strategist supporting HR and people and business leaders. We focus on lowering attrition and increasing productivity, boosting collaboration, attracting and empowering talented parents in the workplace. I speak, guide, mentor, lead interactive workshops that strengthen human connection across families and teams. And again, I'm honored today to be co-hosting with someone whose work and presence I deeply admire, Maria Morris, MS, LPCA. Maria is a therapist and the clinical director with Therapy Resource Group. I was connected with her through Nikki Gaskins, who's the owner of Therapy Resource Group. I saw her speak. And Maria specializes in trauma-informed care. Her mission is to walk alongside individuals and families through life's disruptions and help them reconnect with their inner resources for healing and for growth. So Maria, share a little more about us and welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, I am a therapist and clinical director here at Therapy Resource Group. We are a nonprofit that provides high quality therapeutic services for everyone who deserves healing, specifically those who are trauma survivors. And so we're very involved in the community, try to make therapy accessible and, like I said, very high quality. We work with clients from ages 3 to 103.
You have clients who are 103?
We have some not 103, but we do have some that are
That's amazing.
A little bit seasoned. We do have offices here in Fort Mill. We have offices in Chester and as well as in Charlotte. So, and then personally, I am a mom of 7. I've always been involved in advocacy for families and for education at various levels. And so trauma and the education piece of it is very, very dear to me. So I'm excited about this conversation. It may be a little heavy, but it's so needed.
Oh, it is. It is. And like you said, even someone who's 103, who's still doing work on themselves that impacts everyone around them. Oh, love that. Love that. I need to meet that person.
Right.
Well, I'm going to start with a couple of stats that really might knock me out of my chair. They do knock me out of my chair. They might knock you out of your chair. Roughly 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced some type of trauma event at least once in their lives. I would find that surprising if it was only once in their lives, considering trauma is so broad and can be so different and nuanced for everybody. Trauma just isn't just big events, right? So chronic stress, emotional neglect, systemic injustice, all of these can be traumatic experiences for us. This one hits home too. Children of parents with untreated trauma may carry inherited trauma patterns. And the parents who have done healing work are more likely to raise kiddos who are emotionally resilient and more securely attached. And man, like we really want that for our kids, right? I don't want my kiddo to carry down unhealthy patterns that I've carried or that those before me have carried. So, and this is something that is more of just a footnote here. Like when I find out that parents don't feel like they deserve to work on their own stuff, I really ask them, like, what do they want for their kiddos, right? What do they want for that next generation of their family? Because doing our own work impacts all the others around us, any age, any stage. So.
Yeah.
And just kind of a big announcement too, like this edition may be triggering for some people. We're going to talk about things that are related to trauma. So it's probably not appropriate for your kiddos. And I don't know, what would you input there, Maria?
Yeah, I mean, it can be heavy, but it's really, like I said, it's really, really needed and it's really educational. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but really, in order to deal with anything, like we have to first be aware of it. So,
Okay, amazing. This is a judgment-free conversation, whether your trauma is fresh or from long, long ago, whether you're managing your own healing while you're parenting, or you're witnessing a child or a friend experience hardship. You're not alone and you're not broken. So we're here to share some guidance and some tools, and more than anything, some hope that we can move through this. So, all right, we have our first question. So parents write in and ask questions, or we base some questions off of experiences that my co-host and I have had. So we have a few questions here to share with you all, and really tap into Maria, who's such a great expert. So the first one, what is trauma really? And how do we define it today beyond the classic idea of a big dramatic event?
mm-hmm. Yeah. So trauma is such a buzzword, right? And typically, whenever we have these buzzwords that everyone's kind of talking about, it often gets misconstrued and misrepresented. And so a lot of times people, for a long time, just thought trauma was just coming back from war or just domestic violence or sexual abuse. And really, what trauma at the very basic level means is just a distressing event that overwhelms an individual's nervous system and their ability to cope. And more scientifically, like it has been shown that it does change the brain. And, there's a lot of information there, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. But just like a basic understanding of what trauma is, it's just, again, like a distressing event that now I don't know how to cope with, right? And so there's definitely different levels of trauma, different types of trauma. So an acute trauma would be like a car accident, like a single event, right? Then chronic trauma is going to be more of this ongoing abuse. So repeated and prolonged exposure to stressful events. Complex trauma is really multiple traumatic events that kind of compound on top of each other. And then developmental trauma, we are all kind of more aware of now than we have been. And that occurs in childhood. And it affects the emotional, the psychological development of a child and of your brain. Even going into ACEs studies, like it really does affect your overall physical health, right? Yes. And then I have found that in my work, I work with kiddos and adolescents, parents. About 80 to 90% of the time, I'm asking like, hey, when did these symptoms start? And overwhelmingly, it's during COVID. And so that adds a whole other trauma that we're now dealing with. And that's a collective trauma. Like we've all gone through this together. And yet we are still so wired so uniquely that we have perceived it differently. And so there's such an impact and a unique impact on children. This was a disruption to their environment, a disruption to their relationships, right? And a lot of times with parents, they're like, I don't really have any trauma. And then we start talking about COVID and it's like, oh, well, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times, though, it's not so debilitating that it requires a diagnosis, right? But it still shapes us. Everything that we go through shapes us in some way, and trauma is no different.
Right. Wow. That's so interesting. I remember going into my first Parenting with Peace class. My kiddo is like a kindergartner, first grader. And I thought I'm going to, go in and figure out how to fix him. And the first question it was led by an OT. And one of the first questions she asked was like, think back to some trauma from your childhood. And I thought, I don't really have any. I can't think of any. It was buried like pretty deep, right? Yeah. As I've gone through and done a lot more work through the years too, I'm just amazed at the coping that we can do to, move through.
Absolutely.
And then the work we can do to heal it.
Mm-hmm.
Just beautiful and amazing. And even if we don't know we have it.
Right.
Right? That's beautiful. I had story. I was coaching a group, and one of the moms brought up something that had been really impactful in their family. And it was about her daughter got a junk toy, she called it, out of like a gumball machine. And it, came in one of those little plastic things that you like pop open and whatever it was. Just, a cheap plastic toy. And her daughter just loved this toy for some reason. Who knows what had been the, instigation of it, maybe because she earned the quarter or the 50 cents that she put in the machine to toy. Maybe it just had pretty colors that made her happy. Maybe, you never know, right? And the mom threw away the toy because she just thought it was junk. And she said, my daughter is acting like she's traumatized because I threw away this toy. And we had this amazing discussion. It was a group about, understanding what really is trauma to me, to you, to her, and to her daughter, and how that's so nuanced. Like you shared, it's like different for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone's, in a different place, has different histories and things that they've grown up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like, you said, trauma is generationally passed down. So is resilience, and so that reminded me of that as well, that it is so nuanced and so unique. Right. And so that shows that maybe that mama was a little, not necessarily a bad mom, but maybe a little more healed than what she had originally, thought. So.
Oh, that's true. That could very much be. And yeah, so many other examples. We were talking a little bit as we were prepping, like becoming a parent can be traumatic at times. Losing a parent, obviously, also very traumatic for many people. The idea of doing this particular episode came from a conversation with a mama whose daughter had been sexually assaulted on a school bus. And those things that, may not even be our experience as parents, yet, they're our experience if it's our kiddo who's been affected by this. And lots of that. Bullying is another really big one. So, thank you so much for sharing your insights in there. And shall we be ready to jump to the next question?
Let's do it.
As parents, what are some signs that our past trauma is showing up in our parenting?
Yeah, this is tough at times, and there's a car driving by. Right. The way I always explain it to parents that I see is that if I were to just poke you, right, it would kind of like startle you. You're like, why are you doing that? But you would kind of move on, forget about it. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if you had a bruise there that I didn't see and I poked you, your reaction would be a lot more elevated than what I would have expected, right? Or even maybe than you would have expected. And so that is at the root of it, how we recognize this past trauma is showing up, right? Our kid is doing something that may just be a normal child thing. And it's like, for some reason, this is really triggering me. This is really activating me, right? And then, or you can be like, why am I behaving like this? So what you can look for is some like really controlling behaviors, like in the parenting realm, hypervigilance, that anxiety sitting in, like, the world's an unsafe place. My kids can't be allowed to do anything. Sometimes that is a sign of past trauma, or avoidance altogether, right? This very permissive parenting, I just don't have the capacity to deal with it. And then, of course, if we're poking a bruised spot, the emotional reactivity, right? So we're yelling, or we're shutting down altogether, we're giving the silent treatment, things like that. And then, of course, with parenting in general comes shame and guilt. We're always questioning, like, are we good enough? What are we doing? And whenever this is escalated to a whole other level, 9 times out of 10, it's like, hey, there's probably something unhealed going on that I'm walking around in this shame and this guilt. And it's unconscious, right? Sometimes we're not really aware of it. What happens is, so if your brain sits like this, in our head. This is our brainstem. This is our prefrontal cortex, and this is our amygdala, right? There's a whole lot of other things going on, but this is what we're going to talk about right now. And so our prefrontal cortex is very logical. We're very thinking. I just poked you. We can reason with it. We're walking away. We can deal with it, right? But whenever there is that bruise underneath, I'm poking you, I can't think logically, right? This amygdala is taking over. And I'm so emotional because, hey, I may not have the words to put to this, but I have felt this feeling before. And so it's really our brain's way of protecting us. It is not a bad thing. There is no shame or guilt that needs to be brought to the table with that. It is just recognizing, hey, like something else is going on. And what can we do there?
Oh, love that. And, the prefrontal cortex too, like I always refer to that as your executive functioning part, right? So you can like, what are your thoughts? Like, can you can take back power in your prefrontal cortex from your amygdala? Is that
right? Well, anytime we can put words to something, we are kind of, taking back a little bit of that power. So we're not being controlled. We're, actually in charge and thinking a little more rationally.
Beautiful. So good.
Yeah.
I saw a video the other day, and it was a little bit triggering at first because I think I heard a lot of these in my youth, in my childhood. But maybe we can go back and forth. So the mom was reading some phrases to her child on this video that she experienced having when she was a child, and then she asked her kiddo to fill in with their response. So one of them was, "I'll give you." So
something to cry about.
Right. That's what I got. I'll give you something to cry about. Right. And it was so magical. She had, the "don't make me pull this car over," or "don't make me reach across and," like just a nonviolent communication example this mom was giving was she was having her kiddo fill in what he had heard from her, and she had healed a lot of this stuff and worked on it. And it was like, "I'll give you a big hug," he said. "Don't make me come over there and tickle you and kiss you," right? Or whatever. It was such a, because it was so different than what I may have heard, or someone who may have, had some of those phrases shared with them as kiddos were familiar with. This kiddo had completely different ends to all of these phrases. And I was like, that is right there. Like, it's a healing of trauma.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, we do a parent initiative here at Therapy Resource Group where we meet with all parents who have a minor child starting therapy, just to explain the process, expectations of who we are, and things like that. And in that, we kind of talk a little bit about things you should and shouldn't say, right? And so a parent asked me and was like, "Am I creating trauma?" And it stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, no, you're not creating trauma. Like, we don't set out to create trauma for our kids. Like, we really don't. But we do parent from that place of trauma, right? And like your story showed, that can be so healing whenever we recognize it, and then it's transferred to our kids. So,
changing it generationally.
Yeah,
love that. All right. Question number 3, how do we begin moving through trauma as adults, especially if we're still in the thick of our parenting responsibility?
Yeah, I think with me, this is just my opinion, but I think everything comes down to awareness, right? We have to first be aware that it exists before we can do anything about it. There's this line in the psychology world that you name it to tame it. Right. And if you can put a name to it, then we can deal with it. It's bringing it to the light. And again, it really helps shift us from something that is controlling us to something that we can now engage with intentionally. And that gives us the power, because now we're in the driver's seat. And then I think another thing, as I was thinking through this, is that you don't need a whole lot of time to heal, right? We don't need hours on my couch, right? What we need is consistency, whether that be being consistent with therapy or even just 5 to 10 minutes a day of mindful breathing, stretching. Gratitude is huge. Gratitude work, just stillness, like regulating that nervous system. And whatever you do, just make sure it's consistent. Again, it doesn't have to be all day long, getting out in nature for 5 minutes, sitting on the porch, those things can really start helping us to regulate and be mindful and in the moment. And then again, bring someone along with you, right? We heal in connection. We were created for connection, for relationship. And so there is such an importance in community that we don't really talk about that much, because it does build safety, especially whenever we have this connection. Hey, I can trust this person. And even in the therapeutic realm, like the number one, like telltale sign of how therapy is going, the outcome of therapy is that connection between you and the clinician, right? We have to have that connection before we can do any work. And then, of course, the shame and the guilt, avoiding that shame-based self-talk, right? And then being honest with your kids in that. I think that is huge, right? I always tell parents, you're the book they're reading, right? If they've never seen you have a bad day, how are they going to deal with a bad day, right? Yes. So, yeah, telling them like, hey, mom's having a hard day. I'm doing my best. Sometimes I feel big emotions too. It's okay. What do you think I could do? Like even through the parenting, always like, hey, what do you think I could do? Do you think I should take deep breaths? Kind of helping them start building that executive functioning as well. And then again, just the power of the small, consistent steps. I cannot reiterate that enough, that consistency. There is motion is forward motion, right? We just have to move forward. Sometimes it's left foot, right foot, breathe. Sometimes we can take 2 or 3 steps at a time, but we just have to be consistency in it.
Yes. And we get to choose what size the step is.
Yeah.
It can be a teeny little baby step even.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like I am going to sit quietly for 1 minute and just think about my breathing.
Mm-hmm.
But even that is very challenging.
It is. It is. I like to challenge a lot of my clients. We're just going to sit for 90 seconds. And at 15 seconds, they're like, is it time yet? Right? Because we don't know the power. We don't know how to sit still, especially as mamas. We don't know how to sit still because then that shame and that guilt comes in. Right? And so it is just a powerful 15 seconds, a powerful 90 seconds, just being consistency in it. Whatever we can do, being consistent.
I love that. And there are so many aspects of kind of that woo-woo, I don't know, someone would call it woo-woo, that because I'm always looking for natural ways to heal and natural ways to take care of myself. And I realized when I started meditation many years ago, I was like, how did I miss this all this time? Where was this? Yeah. So many years ago, it didn't even kind of come across my radar, about how powerful that was. And it changed my life. Just absolutely getting centered, just even for short windows. And when I started, it was 1 minute. Right. Nope, I don't have time. I can do 1 minute. And I remember, just saying, okay, just focus on listening to my breath. Just take that one step, and it grew and it grew. And I do nighttime meditations a lot of times now. My monkey mind is going on and I can't fall asleep. Binaural beats or something to give me some calm. Right. Oh, these are great ideas. Thank you. Every moment of every day, and I talk about with my coaching clients too, but whether it's a job loss or our kiddo acting out or navigating changes in our relationships, how do we want to show up? And how do we want our kid to remember us or our colleague to remember us, and keep heading in that direction, where we want it to go? interesting career experiences with some people who really showed up in unique ways in the world. And I came to the decision many years ago, like, okay, well, I understand this is the only thing I have control over.
Right.
And I get to think about that every day. And even if I start to expand out, I'm bringing myself back to, okay, this is what I got control over. Those are good stuff. Thank you for sharing all of those tips and ideas. All right, we got one more question, I think. What do children need most when they go through something traumatic?
Yeah. So I love this question. Again, you're the book they're reading. And I saw something on Instagram this morning. So I didn't get to print it off, but I'm going to read it, right? Okay. So if you are in an airplane and there's turbulence, right? And so the pilot has 3 different ways he could respond, right? He could first say, stop screaming. There's nothing to be upset about. Everything is fine, right? What are you going to feel? Right? Right? You're going to be worried. You're going to be worried. You're going to feel like the pilot doesn't know that there's turbulence, right? And so, or that, hey, there's something really big that he's just ignoring. All right. Or he could say, you're making me scream. It was a bad idea for you to come on this flight. What do we do now? Right?
Wow.
Your reaction then is going to be terrified. Right? Because fear is contagious, right? So you feel like, hey, this turbulence now, the pilot doesn't know what to do. Fear is contagious. Or the pilot could say, hey, you know what? We're going through some turbulence right now, and I know you're scared, and that's okay. I know what I'm doing. I'm not scared of the turbulence or of your fear, right?
Ooh, that last part.
Right. And so now I can take a deep breath because nothing has changed. There's still turbulence all around me, and yet I still feel safe in it. And so it's the same thing with with trauma, with what we're going through, with the big feelings that our kids, it may not even be like something like really traumatic if we label it, but it's just these big feelings of something that they're going through, right? And at the end of the day, we need to feel safe, right? That's what makes what we do. I hate using the word big and little or small, but just for this, that's what makes these small things that we're like the junk toy, right? Because it was really big to me. It may have been really small to you, but it was really big to me, and I didn't feel safe in that moment. Yeah. And then that's whenever our brain's like, oh, okay, let's hold on to this. Let's keep this because I have felt this before. Right. And so it's just that safety. Kids need safety. We need safety. And so it's all about our reaction and our response to them. Are you responding or are we reacting? Especially when they tell us these big things. And then co-regulation, telling the truth in age-appropriate ways, and the importance of attunement. This can be my soapbox at times. So I tell a lot of people about attunement. I work very closely with kiddos who have been in the foster care system, who have been adopted. So we're talking about some deep-rooted traumas, and so 9 times out of 10, they've never been attuned to. And what attunement really is at the very basic level is just being in sync with someone. Right? Just being emotionally in sync with your child or with whoever's in front of you. And studies have said we don't even have to get attunement right 100% of the time. We just have to get it right enough that our child feels safe.
Yes.
So we don't
acknowledged and seen. Right?
Absolutely. And it's not that we have to agree with them, but we see them. We see what this is doing with you. We see this fear and we see the turbulence, right? And so now what are we going to do? How are we going to make you feel safe in it? In my world and therapy, I tell parents all the time, just fix your face. Like it matters.
That's hard, right? Because I know what you're saying here.
Yeah. It matters what you say. It 100% matters what you say, but it also matters what your face looks like, right? And so if a child is picking the little dandelion weeds and you're like, oh, this is just a weed, right? They've already built that wedge in, right? But if you act like this is the most beautiful bouquet of flowers, like they really feel seen just by what your face looks like. My trick, and I'm going to tell you all my secrets, right?
I need it because I like this talks for me all the time. And nonverbal communication.
Yeah. So with teenagers, a lot of times teenagers want to shock you. And so in the therapy world, if they're saying something, and the whole tongue on the roof of your mouth doesn't work, I drop my pencil. And so then I go down, I pick my pencil up, I fix my face, and I come back up and like, oh, all right. So
that's awesome.
It's really that connection, right? And then, of course, teaching children to name their feelings. And we can't do that unless we know how to name them ourselves, right? So that name it to tame it. And then again, those healthy coping skills, right? I know everyone hates us therapists because we tell you to breathe. And like, there are so many other things we can do to cope, right? We talked about some of them earlier, but it's really just consistency and modeling that. Again, I've said it, I think 3 or 4 times now. We are the book that they're reading, especially as they're going through things. And they will go through things.
Yes, and I use the word modeling a lot too, and I'll even play with it a little bit, like or what was the Blue Steel,
Mm-hmm.
the Ben Stiller movie where he'd like with the Blue Steel look, right? I'm like, think of it that way. If that helps you, like make it more fun too, because it doesn't have to be like modeling for our kids doesn't have to be in a box, right? Mm-hmm. It can be, hold on. I gotta drop my pencil and or whatever I'm holding. Oh, my purse. Oh, I dropped my purse. And, interrupting. Or it can even be, I need, mom needs a moment, right? Mm-hmm. Like you even just acknowledge it. And that's modeling for them too, that we don't have to be reactive. Mm-hmm. Every moment we can take a moment in a moment and figure out what we're thinking and figure out what that emotion is for us too. Mm-hmm. I think earlier in my parenting journey, I always felt like I had to do everything immediately. I had to always like have the immediate response. And now, an almost 17-year-old kiddo who is absolutely loving pushing my buttons and looking for ways to trigger me. It's funny now. We'll even laugh that he's doing that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, whoa, that's a good button push right there. And being able to, make it fun and in that safety and in that connection. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're just talking all the good stuff, Maria. I'm grateful that we can have this talk. And the only other thing that I would love to add in to that too is the word deserve. Mm. There's many, many people, including myself, when my journey to change my parenting. Mm-hmm. I didn't really realize what I was doing or how much I deserve to have that support and have that help and have someone see me as the parent and support me in that. And what I love to do for parents in the workplace and families, teenagers. That's just like, and from a coaching perspective, I can support them. And I know you are so, much more deeply ingrained and have done this work for so many years. And I hope people will reach out to you when they really need you. Mm-hmm. Oh wait, we have one more question.
All right, bring it on.
Do we have time? Let me see how we're doing. Oh, we're doing great on time. Okay, let's have one more question then. What does post-traumatic growth look like, and how can our healing actually strengthen families?
Yeah, right. And we our body keeps the score, right? Our body recognizes it. And again, I think once we're aware of what's going on, then we can deal with it, right? And so as we're talking about post-traumatic growth, really it's just that shift in perspective. We're back in control, like we're back in the driver's seat. We can have empathy, right? We can make meaning. And it's that connection, right? It's really, really, really getting rid of the shame, because a lot of times we didn't have control of what happened to us, especially if it's developmentally, or even, like a car wreck or something like that. Like we didn't have that control. And so shame does creep in, but really taking our control back and making something out of it, right? Which is that resilience that can be passed along generationally. And so really not forcing healing, not one word I was going to say hate, but that's really strong. So one word I always, always, always point out to my clients is whenever they say should. I should be doing this, or I should be doing that.
Or need to, or have to, like the same ball of wax right there, right?
I'm like, whose expectations are you living up to? Like, what is should? What's the ideal of perfect or of normal? Like whose idea are we living up to? And so, because that can limit our healing, or it can force it and we're not ready for it. And so then, we're in a whole other situation. So it's really just watching what we're saying and being aware and in tune of what our body feels and what we need. And understanding that, hope and permission, like we don't necessarily have to rush that or force it.
Amazing. Yes. I love all of that. Taking away that guilt and shame and expectation.
Yeah.
Just being connected with ourselves and our kiddos and anyone else around us.
Yeah.
This has been amazing. So thank you so much, everyone who's joining us today or later. And this was Ask the Parent Coach Moving Through Trauma, and my amazing co-host, Maria Morris from Therapy Resource Group. Whether you're in your healing journey or supporting a kiddo through theirs, and maybe also thinking about yours, we hope you feel seen and supported and inspired and safe to take your next step, wherever that is.
Yeah. And I would add just, understanding that healing is not linear, right? Mm-hmm. It's layered, and we may have to revisit the same pain again and again. And each time we do, we get a little stronger. We become a little more aware, and we build our capacity to where we can show up for our kids and for the relationships that we are in.
Oh, so good. Yes. Yes. I sometimes use the analogy of an onion in that way too, like peeling back the layer. You know how an onion's out there, that you want to look at it because it's making you cry, but right? Peeling back all those layers of an onion, and it's got a lot of them, a lot of layers to it. Oh, very great example. So drop a comment for us. Share any takeaways that you took from our conversation today, and tag somebody who deserves to hear this or who you really care about. We'd love to hear how trauma has shaped your parenting and your healing. And we can normalize this journey together and be connected. Mark your calendar. We're going to continue the series of real, raw, and supportive conversations for parents and caregivers. Our next conversation will be with Carolyn Dowdy. She's a family caregiver expert, and we're going to be talking about caregiving within families. And in the meantime, you can connect with me, Heather McElroy, on LinkedIn. Maria, you're on LinkedIn as well?
I am.
Wonderful. And how can people find out more about Therapy Resource Group?
So therapyresourcegroup.org is our website. We have groups offerings throughout the summer for kids and teens and parents and adults of all ages and, whatever we need, right? A lot of fun stuff. So we have an art and creativity camp and all of that stuff going on. And then also on Facebook, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. And that's therapyresourcegroup.org, right?
Correct.
Okay. Excellent. And you can reach me at mymomentor.com. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much for being here, Maria. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.